I've encountered a lot of narcissists in the 15 years I've been engaging in spiritual communities. And so I wanted to share all the thoughts and reflections I've had about what's really going on behind narcissism, why we attract narcissists, and what can we learn and take away from these experiences so that we don't get repeatedly burned and burned again. The first thing I wanted to discuss was this issue of bad behavior versus bad people. Now, I've had relationships, romantic, business, friendships with people that I would now consider narcissists. And knowing them a little bit more intimately than just seeing the kind of bad behavior, I can tell you that these are not bad people, and these are people that have a lot of good qualities. Everyone can display narcissism sometimes. Think about an argument you've had with a partner where you insisted you were right and you thought they were completely wrong and just were unable to look at it from any other point of view. In a way, that's really being narcissistic. You're putting yourself above the other person, you're unwilling to really listen, you can't empathize in that moment, and you are continually blaming the other person for their reaction. So in the heat of an argument, I think everyone can be narcissistic. But the difference between that kind of behavior and what we consider narcissists is that in general, most people after an argument can admit to their mistakes or reflect on it and realize they weren't behaving the best. Whereas people displaying higher narcissistic tendencies find it very difficult to admit any mistakes and to reflect on or see an argument from another person's point of view, even later when the heat and intensity has died down. The first thing I've learned is that people that we might consider narcissists have extremely strong defense mechanisms. Now, defense mechanisms is what the walls that get triggered when we feel like we're under attack or threat. We all have them. These are often talked about as the survival instincts, so the fight, flight, fawn, freeze response. Now, narcissists have a very strong fight response. So that means when they think they're under threat or attack from you, that they will start fighting, and usually their fighting is in words and blame and criticism, and often it's actually really unwarranted, and when you're on the receiving end of it, it can almost feel quite baffling and confusing because there might have been a small misunderstanding, or they might have even done something to hurt your feelings, and when you point this out, all of a sudden you're the one that's attacking them. So it can be really confusing to be on the receiving end of this behavior because you might think, hey, you did a hurtful thing to me and now you're hurting me again by blaming me and being nasty to me with your words. What this is, they have a really strong walled defense, and their defense is to come out fighting. And it doesn't matter how unreasonable they might be, that wall is so strong that you can't kind of have a reasonable discussion or break through that wall to help them see things from your side of the view, or even negotiate to kind of compromise. And from what I've learnt from developing relationships with people with this kind of narcissist behavior is that there's a lot of trauma and childhood wounds underpinning it. So that's where my compassion comes in, because I realize they're actually living their whole life, or most of their life, feeling triggered from their core wounds. Whereas most of us get triggered occasionally, or might go through a period where we're triggered more than not. But usually we will also have periods of time where we feel calm and safe and comfortable interacting with other people. And a common way this defense mechanism acts out in narcissism is in projection. So they can actually project something on you that's often from their past or something. So someone has done something to them in the past, or even something that they're actually now doing to you. And I witnessed this quite a few times where I found out that they had a trauma around someone doing something terrible to them as a child or as a teenager or early adult, and that whoever came into their orbit, they would be very quick to jump to the assumption that you were going to do that to them. And so they were projecting onto you bad behavior that you weren't even displaying. And so you can see how they felt that you were a threat to them. And as soon as that kind of warning sign went off, which they would see really on anyone that would be in their space, that then they would start attacking you. And this is how narcissism works, is that they believe you're attacking them, which justifies them attacking you. The second thing I've learnt is that narcissists actually have a really genuine nice side too. Now, often people assume narcissists are like faking it or manipulative or charming at the beginning, and then they reveal their true terrible self, once they get comfortable. But what I've found is that that's really not true, is that I've seen real genuine kindness, genuine caring, genuine empathy actually from people that would maybe later display narcissistic behavior. And when I look back on that, I really don't think that was fake or they were trying to lure me in. I really see a genuine, gentle soul that has got a lot of trauma, and when they're triggered, they become this different person that acts terribly at times. And so again, it's about recognizing that it's bad behavior, not a bad person, and that it wasn't that you were tricked in with fake niceness, but that they have two different sides, or probably many more sides, but they do have a genuine kindness and caringness, but they can only show that when they're not feeling triggered. If they're triggered, they're going to go into that defense mechanism and, in a sense, become a completely different person, just as you or I would if we were in the heat of an argument with our partner. We're not that person all the time, and it doesn't mean our nice qualities on display most of the time aren't actually real and genuine. And it's this real, genuine kindness, niceness, caringness that's why we're attracted to them in the first place. It's why we want to get in a romantic relationship or friendship or a business partnership, because we genuinely see those admirable qualities that we think are going to be a really good fit with us. So it's important not to dismiss that side of those people as being fake, or to believe that you've got sucked in by fake behavior. It's to acknowledge that we all have different sides to us that are more or less flattering at different times, depending on how we feel about ourselves in that moment. The third, and probably the most important thing I've learned through encountering a lot of narcissistic behavior, is to understand why empaths, people that are gentle, sensitive souls, attract narcissists in the first place, and what we can learn about that goes far beyond just trying to avoid these people. The reason why we're attracted to narcissists is because, like us, they are gentle, sensitive souls that have some trauma that gets triggered. They just get triggered in the opposite direction. So I feel like empaths that often end up in relationships with narcissists tend to go into the freeze or the fawn response when they feel threatened, while the narcissist will go into the fight response. And that's why two narcissists don't end up in relationship with each other for very long, because they just fight so much that they kind of fall apart. You need one person to freeze or to fawn, which is to people please, in order to kind of sustain that dynamic of someone constantly fighting in your direction. And when I think about the big picture of why we might attract narcissists, I think it's because we're actually meant to learn something from each other, because we're both triggered, for example, but we tend to react on opposite sides of the spectrum. And I think there's a healthy middle point that we're both kind of learning from each other how to come into that center balance place. So an empath tends to internalize blame and take on all the responsibility in a situation. So it's all my fault. I could have spoken differently. I could have acted differently. I will do better next time. Whereas a narcissist tends to externalize blame. So it's all the other person's fault. They wouldn't have said that thing or acted like that if that person didn't do that thing first. And neither of those responses are healthy. The healthy response is to be able to accept the parts that you did that contributed, and to also see what someone else did that contributed to that problem. So I want to share with you some specific examples of things that think I've learned from relationships with narcissists, and even noticing things I think they learned from me. So in one relationship, I noticed a guy I was hanging out with really struggled to determine when it was ethically appropriate to offer his healing services and when he should hold back and not do that. And I remember him commenting that I was actually helping him, almost like being a moral compass, helping him to figure out when it was not ethical to do that and when it was ethical to do that. In another situation with a different man, I noticed that I was role modeling why it was good to be a nice person to people, anyway and the rewards of doing that. And he commented that he was really surprised because he'd always believed that you only be nice to someone if they were nice to you first. And if they were a bit rude to you, then you were justified in being rude back to them. So what he learned from me is there was value in being nice to people anyway, regardless of whether they were rude to you in the first place. But as I said, I had a lot to learn from these relationships too. So I learned to be more assertive, to speak up for my needs, to actually say I deserve better than this treatment, and to actually walk away when I wasn't being treated well. They often had really strong boundaries and expectations of others. And so I learned to have higher expectations of what treatment I thought I deserved. So while they walked away at the first sign of any tension and blamed the other person, I learned to have a healthy sense of when this relationship is not working out, I'm allowed to say I deserve better and walk away. So if I return to my question of why narcissism is so overrepresented in spiritual communities, I think it's because there's a lot of wounded and traumatized people that come to spirituality and they're looking to heal and aren't always looking in the right places. So my advice is, instead of shutting yourself off and trying to avoid people because you're worried you're going to bump into a narcissist, is to understand what those encounters have taught you about yourself and your behavior, and how you can become more balanced and more assertive and stand up for your boundaries and speak up for yourself when you feel like you're being disrespected. And in doing so, become more confident that you can interact with anyone and navigate any situation regardless of how someone else is showing up.